Good Wednesday afternoon, everybody. Welcome back down to the library, and it's gonna get bigger here. Well, more on that later, but this is going to be my very late, and I do apologize for that, September book wrap up. I read 11 books in September. Mind you, most of them were very short. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And I usually do the order in which I have read these books. Grab my little notebook here and let's kick this thing off. So the first book I completed was How the Skin Sheds by Chad Lutsky. And this was part of my Splatter Western vlog. And this was about an outlaw who discovered his sister that was brutally murdered and his albino niece left for dead. So it's up to him, his niece, and a runaway slave to hunt down the murderer. This was a fantastic book and probably one of my favorite reads during this Splatter Western vlog. So that was How the Skin Sheds by Chad Lutsky. Followed by my first audiobook, Tent Revival by Edmund Stone. And I really did not know what this book was, so it was basically about like a revival in Kentucky, and the whole ending felt very Lovecraftian. In fact, that ending kind of reminded me of the ending to Revival by Stephen King. I found this one to be very forgettable, and I wanted more out of it. So I gave this 3 stars. The next book that I read is in contention on being one of my favorite books of the year. And it was my favorite book that I read during my Splatter Western vlog. That is Red Station by Kenzie Jennings. This was Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the Wild Frontier. That's exactly what this book was. So this was about like weary travelers on their way to, I think it was St. Louis or something. And they all come across like this mysterious way station, and they spend the night there. Turns out there's like a sadistic family that likes to hunt them down one by one. The final girl in here, Clyde Northaway, was really, really awesome. She's right there in the red dress, and probably one of the most badass chicks that I've ever read in horror in a while. Besides Kim White in Full Brutal. But I loved this book. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend it. And if you're a slasher fan, then I would highly recommend this as well. But that was Red Station by Kenzie Jennings. Next up, I have my first Kindle read, Lovely, Dark and Deep by Megan Stockton. And this was basically about a very violent storm coming in to like the coast, but there is something deadly that comes with it. This was a vampire story that I had no idea about. So, kind of like read it before this month, which I'm focusing on vampires, but that's okay. This was another good one. I highly enjoyed this one. And it was definitely creepy as well. But that was Lovely, Dark, and Deep by Megan Stockton. I gave it 5 stars. Next up is my third and final read for the Splatter Western vlog, Shadow of the Vulture by Regina Garza Mitchell. And this one was my least favorite by far. This one was weird. So it's basically about like this female soldier who loses her partner in the Mexican-American War, and she conjures up a spell by using clothing and resurrects her partner. And they just had to like go throughout the West to like hunt down deranged Texas Rangers. And the older lady in here starts to turn into like a vulture or something. This one was a little weird and kind of forgettable, but I did rate this 3 stars. Next up, These Things Linger by Dan Franklin. And I couldn't even remember to tell you what this book was. Essentially, it's about a man who like lost his estranged uncle, and the uncle is trying to make things right with him in the afterlife. And that's all I really remember. This felt like nothing to me. So I rated this 2 stars. And that was on Audible. Next, a much better one, Bunker Dogs by Gage Greenwood. This one was a fun one. So it's basically like I Am Legend. So it's about like this teenager who is babysitting a young kid, and there's like something in the bunker with them, and they turn out to be like vampires and stuff. So really good read, but it like went back and forth with like all of the memories of how this teenager really acted, because she was kind of like a split personality in a way, where she would like freak out at such weird times. Almost kind of like reminded me of like The Exorcist as well. But I really did enjoy that one. That was 4 stars. And that was also on Audible. Moving on. Jones 1963 by Devin Cabrera. And this one was one of my favorite books that I read this month. It was a pretty solid month, to tell you the truth. But this was about a teenager who just gets severely picked on, and after a prank gone wrong, he just snaps and takes revenge on his tormentors. This book was brutal, and it actually felt like a revenge slasher. I loved this book. So that was 5 stars, and that was on my Kindle. I have 3 more books to talk about. The next one has a very long title, so I'm going to try it. I found a circus tent in the woods behind my house by Ben Farthing. And this was a very short audiobook, probably about like 3 or so hours. And this was about like a man and his son, and they notice this weird tent that pops up in their backyard, henceforth the title of the book. And it was a pretty fun ride. There are clowns and ringmasters and all of that, and they just had to like survive all of the carnival stuff. But this was a pretty solid read. I gave it 4 stars. Next is one that you could definitely read in October, but it was a very, very short story. Last House on Cottage Lane by Ronald Malfi. Yes, I did read a Ronald Malfi this month. Hooray. And this was about a group of trick-or-treaters who take this weird kid with them one Halloween. And they dare him to like go into like this mysterious house. Next minute you know, this new kid is nowhere to be seen. So it ends up kind of like being a ghost story in the end. And the ending was actually kind of creepy. But I really did enjoy this story. I gave it 5 stars. It was on my Kindle. I think it was roughly 25 or 30 pages. So give that one a read. And finally, to wrap up September, I read this bad boy. Clown in a Cornfield 3, The Church of Friendo by Adam Caesar. And this one was very polarizing to me because this focused more on the cult of Friendo and less of the slashing of Friendo. So this continues Quinn Maybrook's story, and it turns out to be like a road horror for her. She meets like this young kid, and they go throughout like the Midwest to find the Church of Friendo and bring them to justice once and for all. I do have to say this one is probably my least favorite, but it was still a very decent read. It felt kind of boring at times though. I mean, this thing is like 448 pages. And I was kind of tempted to like put it aside for a while. But I decided that I did want to read it because that was kind of like a tradition with me. I always wanted to read the Clown in the Cornfield book once it came out. Well, I did. And I ultimately rated this 3 stars. So those are the 11 books that I completed in September. And coming up right after this, I have more friends. I have no idea where I'm going to put them, but I'm going to try my darndest. It's going to be my AuthorCon haul. And boy, I tell you what, it is a lot. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to go ahead and record that in a couple minutes. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and see you in a minute. Adios. Peace.